Hey everyone. Today I'm going to show you the oldest photographs that have survived to this day. This is the very first photograph ever taken in human history, 1826. This photo is from 1838. You're looking at a busy Paris street, but there's only one person visible in the frame because everyone else was moving and the camera couldn't catch them. The man in the bottom left corner was getting his shoes shined, so he stood still long enough to be captured. In 1869, in the state of Utah, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, connecting the east and west of the country. Not a single one of the more than 20,000 Chinese workers who hand-drilled through rock and built most of the line was invited to be in this photo. For over 100 years, artists had been drawing galloping horses wrong. In 1878, a photographer was hired to settle the question once and for all. Does a horse lift all four hooves off the ground at once during a gallop? Turns out, yes. Bandit's Roost, 1888. This alley in New York City no longer exists. Photographer Jacob Riis captured it as a document of life in the city's poorest slums, home mostly to Italian immigrants. 1866. Photographer Carlton Watkins. These massive sequoias and cliffs were photographed with such skill that the images actually changed policy. President Lincoln saw Watkins' work and signed the first nature conservation law in American history. The Montparnasse train crash, 1895. The engineer was running 7 minutes late and tried to make up the time. The brakes failed, the train tore through the station hall, blew out the wall, and nosedived onto the square outside. One woman was killed, a newspaper vendor. Otto von Bismarck on his deathbed, 1898. The Iron Chancellor unified Germany and redrew the map of Europe. After his death, he was photographed right there in his bed. That kind of photo was common practice back then, taken as a keepsake. 1898. A Belgian expedition became the first in history to survive a winter in Antarctica. Among the crew was a young Roald Amundsen, who would later become the first man to reach the South Pole. This photo marks the beginning of his great adventure. 1837. One of the earliest surviving daguerreotypes ever made. The inventor pointed his camera at his own studio and captured an image that still shocks people with its sharpness and detail. For 1837, it was nothing short of a miracle. October 1839. The photographer pulled the lens cap off, ran into frame, held perfectly still for several minutes, then walked back. On the back of the print he wrote, "First light portrait." The first photograph of the moon. A professor at a New York university took this from the roof of his building. In 1839, he tried many times and failed. Finally, in 1840, a 20-minute exposure gave him what he was looking for. The first photograph of Niagara Falls, 1840. One of the most famous waterfalls in the world, captured on camera for the very first time. The image is stunning. 1845. A photographer photographing a photographer. One of the earliest professional portraits in history. The man in the frame is holding samples of his own work. Back in those days, having your portrait taken was considered a luxury. The first photograph of the sun. The star we orbit was captured on a plate for the first time. It was something entirely new for humanity, seeing the sun without being blinded by it. The first photograph of a Native American, 1847. The man in the image is a tribal chief. This is one of the earliest portraits of a native inhabitant of America taken by a professional photographer. The first and only surviving photograph from an entire expedition into the far west, 1853. Most of the images from that journey were lost along with their plates. This one somehow made it. The first color photograph, 1861. A plaid ribbon became the first color image in history, and it was made by one of the greatest physicists of the era, who wasn't even studying photography. The first aerial photograph, 1858. A French photographer went up in a hot air balloon with a massive camera and shot the world from above for the first time in history. The photo was taken from about 260 feet up. 1860. A shot of Boston from above, also one of the oldest surviving aerial photographs in the world. A city captured from the sky, 43 years before the first airplane ever flew. A husband asked his wife to place her hand under rays of an unknown nature, and the result was the first X-ray image in history. She looked at it, saw her own skeleton and her wedding ring, and said, "I have seen my own death." 1871. Members of the U.S. Congress didn't believe the stories they were hearing about the hot springs of Yellowstone. So a photographer joined an expedition out there and came back with pictures. The following year, Congress passed a law creating the world's first national park. 1872. This shot of the cliffs captures the scale of nature so well that you feel tiny just looking at it. The commercial success of work like this helped fund the photographer's later experiments, including the one with the galloping horse. Shoshone Falls, 1874. This was photographed during a military expedition through the uncharted lands of Idaho. The image showed people on the East Coast that behind the mountains lay a world just as grand as anything they'd ever seen. The first color landscape photograph, 1877. And all of this was 16 years before the invention of the car. A French inventor developed a method of color photography using 3 filters and was the first person in the world to apply it to a landscape. This 1895 photo shows Fridtjof Nansen moments before he left his ship and set out on foot toward the North Pole. He didn't make it all the way, but he set the record for his time. The expedition lasted 3 years. The construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway. The longest railroad in the world was built under impossible conditions. This shot of workers by the tracks is one of the few documentary records of that construction. The first underwater photograph, 1899. To get this shot, a scientist lowered a camera weighing over 990 pounds beneath the surface. His colleague in the frame is holding a sign that reads, "Underwater Photography." The exposure time was around 30 minutes. The crash of the Wright brothers aircraft, 1908. This is a photograph of the first aviation accident in history. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. If you're into the topic of very old photographs from the 1800s, let me know in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and hit like on the video. That's how I know what you're enjoying, and I'll keep making more of these.